Welcome back to Ambivalent Offenders. This is Jamie,
And this is Erin.
and we are excited to have another story to tell you. And today is, in theory, but we're just starting it now, so I can't promise, but in theory is a one-parter. So,
Yay! It's been so long. It's been 84 years.
Feels like it. And we're in the United States. We're in more modern times. We're leaving Europe behind. We're headed, like I said, to the United States, baby. We're going down to the South, all the way to Mississippi. Not a place that I want to go on my list, but still.
Jamie, don't alienate our Mississippi listener.
Tell me why I should come visit.
Well, for one, I love the South. There's at least four shrimp and grits, so...
I just said Mississippi.
Mississippi has amazing shrimp and grits, I bet. I mean, I don't know, but I'm just feeling it.
Got it. Erin, fucking up to you. But before we head down south, just a quick ask from us to rate, review, and tell your friends about us. We really appreciate all of that. We've had a few more ratings come through and reviews, and that's always appreciated. And if Patreon is too much of a commitment for that month to month, we also do have Buy Me a Coffee, which is linked in this episode. The notes has all our social media links. That lets you give a one-time donation, not actual coffee, but like you can do like a $5.
Mm-hmm. But I mean, I'll take coffee.
Yeah, I mean, we might spend it on coffee. Who knows? But we do appreciate those listens and support. As we said, we love doing this, so we hope to continue to do that.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody who's already taken time to write a review and do the ratings. And especially for ratings, it's really quick. Get going and you can just star them really quick. But if you have more time and want to make us even happier, review, please.
Yeah. It's always nice to hear feedback. Or again, you can always send feedback at ambivalent.offenders.podcast@gmail.com. That's where you can also send feedback if there's a particular person you want us to cover, or you want to do a listener judgment, or anything. You can reach out to us there. I'm excited about this one because this is one of those, I don't want to say fluke ones, but ones that just come to you, kind of like Erin with Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, or me with Zarina Alexandra. It just popped into my brain, and I was like, yeah, I'm really interested in going and exploring this. And just the fact that who we're exploring today, Elvis, has that entertainer aspect, I think it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah.
So
I know a few things about his life, and obviously I've seen movies and images of him and his music, but I'd be curious to hear a deeper dive, because I feel like everything I know is probably more surface level.
Yeah, that's how I felt too. I got really into an Elvis kick, though. I'm going to try not to have that give a bias to my final judgment. I've been grooving to Elvis while I was writing this.
I mean, but at least I think that will obviously be a portion of the judgment. It's the music.
Yeah, we'll talk about that when we get there. So I'll get started. It's January 8th, 1935. A baby is born. Not just any baby, but baby Jesus. Just kidding.
Oh,
it's Elvis.
I was like 35. That's a little late. I mean,
yeah,
I'm not a religious scholar, but I assume it was a little. Yeah,
I know it's not as dramatic when the person's in the title, so you knew Elvis was going to come up today. Before I jump more into baby Elvis, I'll just kind of give how I'm going to do this episode, because it's a little different. It's closer to how I did the Nixon episode. So of course I'm going to do biographical information, the key stuff, because you got to know who he is, who he came from, what he came from, and that led up to his fame and into his fame. But my focus will really be on the accomplishments and problematic parts of Elvis. So we'll start with a little bit of background. Then we'll do problematics, accomplishments, and then kind of wrap up his life. And we'll go from there.
Yeah. Sounds good. I'm in.
Perfect. It's kind of funny in a way that it's like the Nixon episode, because there's that famous picture of Elvis and Nixon shaking hands.
I love that one. Nixon. And then Elvis is like, in all his regalia. And Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good one. Okay. Now back to Mississippi, little baby Elvis. Here's where I'll highlight his early life, especially some things that make him not an obvious choice to eventually be anointed the king of rock and roll. Something I don't think I knew, or maybe I did at one point, he was supposed to be a twin, but his twin Jesse was born stillborn.
Sad.
Tears coming from this twin. But I made this connection. E and J.
Oh, nice.
Elvis and Jesse, Aaron and Jamie.
Perfect. Yeah, this is perfect for the episode.
Yeah, so I guess you would have been Elvis in this scenario.
Yay!
You would have been going on and wearing those jumpsuits.
To be fair, you know this about me. I do love a jumpsuit.
Yeah, you do. I haven't seen you in one quite as bejeweled as Elvis is.
No,
But
not yet.
maybe at some point. He didn't really hit that stride till he was in late 30s and 40s. So
Yeah, I've got time.
it also makes me curious if his twin had lived, would they have been like a musical duo? I'm just curious. I know the show isn't about what ifs. It's just something I thought about when I saw that.
Yeah, loss, obviously, both sad for his parents and his mother in particular, but also the hypothetical what if, different avenues of history, perhaps.
His parents are described in the sources that I read as very loving. Elvis was close to them and also working class, although sources, some say working class and some say poor. Either way, he's definitely not somebody, as I said, who you would expect to suddenly rise up in the ranks. He doesn't have that money to like go to LA and start recording and things like that. There's not like family money or anything.
He's not a Nepo baby.
Nope. So they moved around a lot during his younger years. No angst from this boy compared to Edward II. I also thought he didn't have any hobbies like digging ditches, but
well,
I also didn't see it written anywhere.
He
so
could have
been digging. Yeah. As I said, he loved his parents, especially was close to his mom, and they brought him up with strong faith. And faith is what's going to really bring him into kind of that first musical influence. So he goes to the Assembly of God Church, a mostly Black church where gospel music first becomes important in his life. So more about music in Elvis's early life. He gets his first guitar at age 11. And a few years later, he won a talent show at a high school in Memphis. So clearly that boy's got talent right from the start. Right? Yeah. He's natural born talent.
If it was nowadays, he'd be on like American Idol or I don't know, or America's Got Talent.
After his high school graduation in 1953, he worked odd jobs while trying to break into the music scene. Kind of that normal Hollywood story, right? Of course, I'm picturing him waitering. Yeah. You know, but he's doing all those odd jobs to survive while he's trying to break into the scene. But actually that same year, he gets lucky. He cuts his first demo at Sun Studio under the guidance of the label's owner, Sam Phillips, who's going to come up again later. And this is actually when he starts touring and recording more and more, waiting to break through. So we're not at the Elvis hysteria yet, but he's begins touring right away to gather that audience.
So I'm assuming it's much smaller venues and all that.
Yes. But he doesn't have to really wait long at all to break through. Again, he graduated high school in 1953. Fairly quickly, he starts gaining attention, mostly for what many of us think of when we think of Elvis and how he performs. What do you think?
Yeah, the dancing, the hip movements, all that.
Yep, those hip gyrating, moving around, super scandalous for this time. But we know, right, sex and scandal sells, and that gains him quite a bit of fans, especially female fans. Also, his face doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
He's a good-looking man.
Yes.
So within 3 years, now we're in 1956, he signs with larger label, RCA Records, and gets his first #1 single. That's Heartbreak Hotel, and his first #1 album. And to top it off, he also gets a movie contract with Paramount Pictures.
Wow. Yeah, that's very successful. And in a relatively short amount of time. You think so many of these people, they spend a decade or more trying to break it and get it big. And he's not only getting his #1 single, but then also starting to become an actor and getting into that too. So that's a lot of success really early.
Yeah, he has this dual path. Like a lot of times we see, at least nowadays, it's like people break through as a singer and then they go into acting or vice versa. But he really goes on both those trajectories at the same time because in the same year, 1956, his first film, Love Me Tender, is a hit. Not a surprise based on all the information I just gave you. But really the moment, I would say, the moment when he goes from popular artist to Elvis fucking Presley, like the king as we know him, although maybe not quite the king. The king
comes later.
Comes later.
Baby king.
Baby king, but really like pushes him to, I would say, like next level.
Like A-list, B or C list.
Right. Right. Just makes him that suddenly
superstar.
That figure. Superstar, right, is when he performs on the Ed Sullivan Show on September 9th, 1956. He's only 21, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah, that's so young.
I pictured him young, but like 21 young.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking more solidly, like 25.
Mid-20s.
At least mid-20s.
Yeah. And we, of course, see other artists who break through with the Ed Sullivan Show, like the Beatles, who we'll talk about actually later. He ends up performing 3 times on the Ed Sullivan Show, but his first performance divides people. Some call his performance vulgar. Again, those hip moving. And others, of course, find it sexy. As I said, he performs 3 times on the show, and the third performance, they actually censored it. They only did it from the waist.
Oh my God.
Which is hilarious. Don't move those hips.
No, we can't have those hips on TV. Come on.
Yeah. Actually, I have a clip later and I'll link it in our show notes that I'm going to show Aaron when it is later days. He talks about that.
Being censored.
Yeah, about that.
That's hilarious.
How kind of ridiculous he looked then because it was just his upper body moving.
Yeah, I'm trying to picture. I'll have to look for that one. But yeah, I feel like it loses the effect if you don't see what's going on down below.
Right. So right now, Aaron, I'm going to share with you his first performance and get your commentary. So if you want to click on that link, I'll link this in the notes. You can mute. Yeah, you can mute, watch.
Okay, I'm going to watch the performance now. I have watched the performance of Hound Dog.
You watched the whole thing already?
I didn't watch the whole thing, but I think I got the gist, but I'll watch.
No, I was watching the whole thing, so. Okay. So what are your thoughts? Are you fangirling? What stood out to you?
Well, obviously, the hips, the dancing. I mean, it is much different. So you think of the 50s, the more popular artists of the time. You're thinking of Sinatra, like a Bobby Darin. They're not dancing like that. Maybe if there is some sort of dancing, it's more choreographed. This is more organic and sex. Dare I say sexy?
How would you describe his demeanor and kind of as he comes on and his charisma, I guess?
Yeah, he's definitely got that bad boy, devil may care attitude, a little bit cheeky. He's not. He's not taking himself too seriously, which again I think is much different than some of the other popular artists of the time. So I think that contrast is pretty big. You could see why the girls went wild for him because he's got that like bad boy, but he's a singer and he's got the moves.
Yeah. Even just like that fake out, I like when he's about to play and he like pauses and there's some more screaming.
Yeah, he knows the effect he has.
Oh yeah, and he does that little smile and you definitely are charmed by him. That's obviously the case like across the nation. Suddenly he's an international superstar sensation. And it makes sense, right? He's handsome, he's charismatic, as you saw there. Like that's going to be a theme that's going to come up throughout his entire life. And he brings a really unique sound to the mainstream. His influences and his music sounds very different from the music that came before. So his influences from gospel in the church to black R&B he heard on the streets while in Memphis as a teen, very, very different. And yes, I'm going to talk about the music and the influence.
I'm thinking of it compared to things like, I think Sinatra's later, but I know he'll overlap with Elvis at some point. But yeah, like the Bobby Darrens of it, like just much more sedate.
Just a very like straight lace.
Yeah, like suit, but in the suit sometimes like by a piano, but not much dancing, or at least sort of that, not the same as Elvis is doing.
Mm-hmm. Crooning to the audience, but like in a very, I would say, non-sexual way.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to pause on his music side of his biography. Now we're going to move into his military service and marriage. And this is where we get into the section of our podcast where we go both into accomplishments and problems.
Mm-hmm.
Not always chronologically, but I'm going to try to keep it as straightforward as I can. When we're talking about positives, it's pretty remarkable that he gets a draft notice in 1957. So remember, this is a year after he like really takes off, and he serves in the army while this big, huge superstar.
Mm-hmm.
So try to imagine that like in today's world. Of course, my brain's going back to like with boy bands. So like imagine being drafted alongside Justin Timberlake at the height of NSYNC. Mm-hmm. I know it's an old reference.
Yeah, everybody's going to be like, ooh.
Right. And I'm going to talk later on the accomplishments. There are totally ways he could have got out of it, but he serves 2 years. And we know 2 years in celebrity world.
Yeah, that's
and
a lot.
Like fame world, that's a lot. I don't want to go into too much detail. But
I know you'll get into this later, but I'm assuming he's not doing anything while he's over there. He's not releasing new music. Not okay. So he is out of the, essentially out of the public eye.
He's still definitely, there's pictures taken of him and such, but he's not
building on that initial success.
Right. That momentum is, I don't want to say totally hampered, because of course people are still taking photos of him. It's really hard for him to go out in public.
Yeah, but he's not going to be on Ed Sullivan, so it is very much a break in his success,
a career.
Yeah, a break in,
but right away.
Yeah,
like
most people wouldn't be able to rebound from that.
No. That's what I think it totally, because this is, as I said, 1956 is when Ed Sullivan happens, and now you're in 1957, he's drafted. Before he's sent to Germany, his mother dies. And of course, Elvis is devastated. As I said, he had a really loving relationship with his parents, and especially his mother.
Yeah, that's what I've heard, is him and his mom have had a, I don't know, unusually close.
So while he's still grieving, he's sent to Germany. And now we're going to get into some problematic territory.
I know what's coming.
Okay. Now we're going to get into our first part. We really have kind of 2 problematic themes that we're going to go on. So while in Germany, he meets what the biography.com article calls a young teenager named Priscilla Boyu. Now, the recent film Priscilla by Sofia Coppola, I do want to mention, it covers Priscilla's viewpoint from the start of the relationship. It's actually based on Priscilla's memoir, which I'm going to quote from a few times. Priscilla is also an executive producer on the film, so I'm going to give it more weight than just any film.
I'm assuming you watched it then.
Haven't yet.
Oh, I have.
I do want to watch
I have.
Did you like
it? I did. Yeah, it was good. I think it was on HBO. I'm not sure if
okay. I do want to see it.
I mean, I liked it. I don't condone some of the actions in there.
So either way, the facts remain the facts. And Priscilla is 14 when she meets Elvis, who is 24. I'm going to say that again. Elvis is 24 years old, and she is 14. So it's been said that Elvis sent out his friends out to scout young girls. And she is young. She's 14, like a high school freshman, is obviously young. So a soldier had approached her, supposedly, and asked if she wanted to attend one of his parties.
Which any 14-year would be like, hell
yeah. Of course, 100%. Somehow she convinces her parents and she attends the party. It appears like an innocent first meeting, but keep in mind, Elvis is well aware that she's only 14.
Yeah, this is not a This is not one of those where, oh, he thinks she's 18.
Right. And like, oh my gosh, I did not know that. No. And he continued to seek her attention throughout her high school years. Back to the recent Priscilla film, Aaron, you'll probably then be able to have some of these references. Before it even began filming, Priscilla and Elvis's daughter, if you don't know, yes, they end up having a child together, Lisa Marie Presley. Lisa Marie was actually quite angry about her dad's portrayal in the film.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Before this was just with the script. So she wrote to Coppola saying, quote, "My father only comes across as a predator and manipulative. As his daughter, I don't read this and see any of my father in this character." End quote. And not that I want to discount Lisa Marie's perspective of her dad or her life with her dad, but I do want to note, right, people are complex and they appear differently in different scenarios, different relationships. We've seen this many times in history. Somebody can be both a loving father and a creepy pedophile at the same time.
Yeah.
So Lisa Marie's relationship with Elvis is obviously going to be different than the one he had with other women. So Coppola replies back, and I think she does a good job of trying to kind of be in the middle of this relationship. As I said, Priscilla herself is all in. It's based on her memoir. She's an executive producer that we're just talking about the daughter. Coppola replied, quote, "I'm taking great care in honoring your mother while also presenting your father with sensitivity and complexity," end quote.
Yeah, see, I understand where Lisa Marie's coming from. She obviously has a lot of love for her father and doesn't want, there's a lot to
his legacy is a big thing, right?
It is. That Graceland, it all ties into Elvis's legacy. But I do want to say, as much as, at least from what I saw in the film, I think presenting the facts does not necessarily, I don't think it, okay, I'm trying to think of what to say. I didn't think it leaned into necessarily making him seem like a predator. I think it does present him as particularly sensitive and obviously taken by this young girl. I almost approached the Lisa Marie thing being like, well, it's almost like it's like kind of a tell, you know what it is when that scenario. So it presenting on screen looks bad because it is bad.
Yeah. And I think what also becomes hard is Priscilla to this day is still very loving of Elvis. And
yeah, their relationship.
It's not like
their relationship together. She's very protective of that.
Yeah. She's not looking back and being like, oh, this was a predator type situation. She still has she continues to have great love for him. And we'll see that even after they immediately get divorced. Not that they immediately get divorced, but even in the, like, right as they're getting divorced, they walk out of the courthouse holding hands. Like, they have this connection.
Yeah, she's fond of him for the rest of her life. But again, the people that are in the relationship usually aren't the ones that they can't see what it is from the outside. And I'm sure she has a version of the story that she thinks it is, that it's a love story for her. And we can't
it's romantic.
Yeah, we can't discount that. I don't want to say that she's wrong, but the age and the facts of it to anyone looking on is hard to escape.
That's where it becomes so complex.
Yeah, because she obviously didn't. I know that, she continues to not necessarily see that it was a problem, but it's a problem.
Right. And of course, a 14-year-old Priscilla is going to be head over heels for Elvis. He's this superstar who's giving attention to her.
Yeah, so that's what I mean. It's not just the age that's the imbalance. He's a superstar. He's internationally known, and she's a 14-year-old girl who goes to high school.
Yeah. So the power imbalance and then the age piece, like how a 14-year-old views love and sex and all that versus a 24-year-old is very different, right? Your brain is
Exactly.
not fully developed at 14.
It's
So
hardly,
in an interview as a
it's hardly developed at 20, 24, where he's at.
exactly. And I've taught high schoolers and I've taught freshmen, and freshmen are like babies. So it just kind of boggles my mind. I'm not that I'm saying 24-year-olds are still to me babies, but they're just on two totally different planets that it really is hard. Now, in an interview when the film came out, Priscilla, we had just talked about, still justifies the relationship, saying, quote, "It was a different world," end quote. Which I don't, as you said, we can't totally judge her relationship, but we can also be like, it was different enough where Elvis, they did try to kind of keep it quiet. And
Yeah, if you're keeping
they
it
knew-
quiet,
they
there's a reason. There's a reason that you're trying to
Right.
keep it quiet. Not just
Yeah.
because you don't want him to seem attached. You know that they obviously know at the heart of it, it's problematic.
Now, because she's young, Elvis thought he could mold her into his, quote, "ideal woman,"
Nope.
end quote.
Yeah. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
if you want to be fair to him, he's not the only man who has approached a woman like
Mhm.
that. But that, again, that's about as generous as you can be to him about that.
Right. He told a friend she's, quote, "young enough that I can train her any way I want,"
Ew.
end quote.
I know.
Right.
I'm just thinking it is very medieval. That's what some of the kings would get really young girls and be like, perfect, I can mold her into my perfect queen. So like this is
Even like right now when I was watching House of Dragons, I just started it. I'm like, yeah, I can see that. They marry babies, not only because of the heirs, but you get this adoring, loving person who's a baby who only knows that one side of you. And especially if you're somebody like an Elvis who's like at the height of his fame. I shouldn't say height of his fame, but he's very, very popular. And he's, again, giving attention to you. Like, I can just imagine that dynamic.
Yeah. Again, if you were Jamie, you're 14, Justin Timberlake, because he's come up to you and he's said, you know, you're my girl, Jamie. I only want you. You're the girl for me.
Yeah.
You'd say, I'm all in.
I am. I wrote in my diary. I found it not too long ago. I don't know how old I was. Not 14 for sure. Probably like 10. But I wrote, I know for sure I'll marry Justin Timberlake or Lance Bass. Neither has happened,
You do
but
have.
I'm not dead. Yep, I'm not dead.
I mean, one of them's more likely, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Justin is also all kinds of problematic.
Exactly. So, unsurprisingly, Priscilla's going to be really accepting of his influences at first because he's fucking Elvis.
Yeah.
And this will obviously change as she becomes, an adult with her own agency. He invites her to his room on their second meeting and kisses her. Now, her parents aren't completely naive. They insist on meeting him after a few dates. Her dad flat out asks why a star was interested in his teenage daughter. And Elvis' response was, yeah. I'm like, yeah, you would think. Elvis's response was, quote, "Well, sir, I happen to be very fond of her. She's a lot more mature than her age, and I enjoy her company," end quote. Always that maturity piece, right? They always bring up, like, she's very mature.
Such a mature
for her age.
14-year-old. Yeah.
And this is where I totally side-eye her parents because apparently they were charmed enough by him to allow the relationship to continue.
Yeah.
And if not totally charmed, then maybe this quote from Priscilla's memoir tells us more about the reasoning why they let things go. Quote, "We tried to make them believe it was proper and platonic, and they wanted to believe me. Whenever they tried to stop us from seeing each other, I pleaded and cried and made them and myself miserable," quote.
Yeah, so that's what in the movie Priscilla, it's not really put out there that her parents are happy. They do a lot. They are trying to stop it, and they are like that quote. I think that quote's in there where they're like, why him? Why you? And it does show the very teenageness of it all, where Yeah, I know a lot of people judge her parents, letting her do what she does, but I don't think they had a real say because she would have found a way to see him regardless. So she would have run away.
That's what she does say.
Yeah.
She's like, no matter what, I was gonna see him.
Yeah.
But
it does approach it where she, holds their hand to the fire, and there's a lot of tears, and at least from the movie's
manipulation.
Yeah, from the movie's perspective, they are sort of at a loss. They don't know really what to do with it.
Right.
Obviously, we don't know what's the real. Were they charmed and they let her do it, or were they just didn't know what to do and things sort of snowball? I don't know what the real thing is, but
it's hard for me as a parent because I'm like, okay, so you're being a brat, so just go ahead and have your 24-year-old boyfriend. Where's like Isabella France?
Yeah.
Throw her in a convent. Joking.
She would have.
She did.
If she was related to the dispensers. Absolutely.
Been like, convent to you.
We're closer in age to her parents than we are to Priscilla at this time. So I feel for them because it's really hard. You're a 14-year-old girl. One of the biggest stars in the world is paying attention to you, and your parents won't freaking let you, hang out with him or being weird. Right. And you're like, oh my God, parents, just let us be. Like, this is a teenage dream.
And how many girls, though, even without an Elvis, have had arguments with their parents about, let me see this bad boy.
Yeah.
Let me see blah, blah, blah.
It's like that times 1,000.
Right. I'm just going to put it out there. My daughter, she's only not even 3 yet, but I just want to put it out there. She isn't allowed at 14 to date a mid-20s superstar.
Sorry, Harpy.
I'm going to put my foot down.
Harpy.
Yeah, sorry, Harpy. Not going to happen.
Auntie Erin says no, too. So don't come to Aunt Erin and try to have her convince your mom. Not going to happen.
If you want to scroll down to the next page, you'll see some pictures of her. First, you'll see a picture of her when she's 16, and then you'll also see pictures of her when she's 14. So you want to just take a look really quick.
Yeah, she looks young. And I know a lot of teens at that time look more mature, but she looks young. She has baby face. She looks 14.
Yeah.
Like, the hair is mature, but again, this is not a scenario where I look at this and I'm like, she's an 18-year-old girl. She looks like a baby.
She looks like a girl. Yeah, I just really wanted to kind of center you in what she looks like at that time.
Yeah. No, she looks her age.
Yep. During the rest of Elvis's time in Germany, he's going to leave in 1960. They're together. Although Elvis must have both recognized the controversy and, of course, he's Elvis. So they never went to out much in public. Obviously, you saw when he leaves, she sees him off, but they weren't like going on dates to things around places because of, I think, knowing the age piece, but also Elvis just couldn't do that. And he's her world. She even starts falling behind in school, and Elvis kindly offers her some pills. From the biography.com article I read, he saw that she was getting tired trying to balance this life and said, hey, I want you to take these. They'll help you stay awake during the day.
No.
She doesn't take them at this time.
Right? Don't do it.
Yeah. Definitely some uppers. Another thing that apparently doesn't happen in Germany at this time. Maybe you can give me some glimpse from the Priscilla film, but apparently consummating their relationship doesn't happen at this time.
Yeah, it's not in the film. That doesn't happen till much later.
Apparently, Priscilla was on board because she's a horny teenager, but Elvis, ever the Southern gentleman, said, quote, someday we will, Priscilla, but not now. You're just too young.
Yeah, he has. Well,
what do you think? You call bullshit on it, or you think that's true?
Oh, do I think that they didn't consummate?
Yeah.
I actually believe her. I think that he does. He has that whore Madonna mentality. So I feel like he wants to keep her pure and so that she's his
I could see
Priscilla.
that.
I assume he's sleeping with other people, and I know at a later date he is.
Oh, yeah.
So he has women who he doesn't put in that Madonna box. At least I believe it, at least in terms of what I know about how he views women.
And of course, having sex versus doing other things.
Yeah.
There's a whole gamut of things, but I already showed you a picture when he's leaving Germany in 1960. Obviously, she's sad. She's 16 at this time, which is crazy.
Yeah.
When he leaves Germany, Priscilla's parents try to, I would say, like, keep her grounded in reality. Like, he's probably not going to keep this up. This is probably just a Germany thing.
Yeah, when he was there and now he's back in his element.
Back
he's
to being Elvis.
Yeah, he has so many choices in terms of women that he can be with.
Right. Priscilla apparently writes him letters with pink envelopes, so they stand out from the fan letters.
Very 14-year-old girl.
They talk on the phone, but they're reunited when Elvis invites now 17-year-old Priscilla to LA. And her parents say yes.
Yeah, and I know
she hasn't graduated high school yet.
They do approach this in the Priscilla movie. And again, it is sort of like she's been so sad and depressed because he's been away that they're strong-armed into making it happen, where we don't really want this to happen, but she's so miserable.
I'm just like, grow back, bum parents.
I mean, I'm not saying that would be my decision, but it is,
100%.
at least it's that presented like, oh yeah, you want to go to LA? Go to LA. Go see your 24-year-old boyfriend, or he'd be 27-year-old boyfriend. So approaching 30. Here's some sunscreen. Go have fun, girl.
Right. She goes out to LA. He obviously shows her around LA, takes her to Las Vegas during this time. And this is also the time when he introduces her to amphetamines and sleeping pills so she can align her sleep schedule to Elvis's. Because you see, everything revolves around Elvis. You'll love this quote from her memoir. Quote, "He became my father, husband, and very nearly God."
Don't love it.
Which, this is her first love. Also, he's Elvis Presley on top of it. And every girl in the world would want to be in her position. So you can see that she would be like, yes, everything revolves around
she
him.
wants to do everything she can to keep that relationship going because she's a teenager and she thinks that there's no life without my boyfriend. We've all been there. We've all been there, girl.
Yeah, he's the one. I can't imagine life without him. Must stay with him no matter what.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm already not loving this age gap. And then we got to add this other problematic layer, part of the problematic sandwich, and his increasingly controlling nature over Priscilla. So Priscilla wrote in her memoir, quote, "Something in his Southern upbringing had taught him that the right girl was to be saved for marriage. I was that girl. At the same time, he molded me into his woman. I wore the clothes, hairstyle, and makeup of his careful choosing," end quote. During this trip, he starts dressing her like, quote, his little doll, end quote. That's what Priscilla called it.
Get a real doll then. Women aren't your playthings. They're not your dolls.
And the fact that Priscilla called it like that, I think gives a lot of weight. And telling her he, quote, likes a lot of makeup. And I'm like, hey, Elvis, yeah, I like makeup too, but it's not because my boyfriend tells me to like it. So basically her entire appearance is curated by Elvis. But what's she going to do? Say no to the superstar who flew her over from Germany in this trip?
Yeah, in the film, there's like a whole shopping montage or like a fashion show montage where she's showing off and he's saying yes, no. Then there's, she likes one thing, he says no. And of course, she's not going to wear that. She's going to wear what he likes. Not the only woman to mold herself based on her boyfriend's preferences. But that doesn't make it right.
Yeah. So you can see how much her appearance has changed by the time they're married. And a few short years, 1967. So if you want to scroll down, you'll see their
Yeah,
wedding
it's
photo.
sort of what people, I think most people, when they think of Priscilla, they think of the big black hair,
Big,
like beehive,
heavy, cold eyeliner.
the classic Priscilla look. So yeah, she's definitely looks much different than the very fresh faced, like the other pictures. You could tell she's wearing a little bit of makeup, but so much more baby face. And yeah, it's definitely a transformation.
100%. So she wants to stay to finish high school with him. Yeah, I know. But her parents, again, are not on board. But Elvis reassures them that she would be living with his father and stepmom, not at Graceland.
Okay, then that's fine. Perfect.
Right.
That's what I was worried about when you want my child to leave Germany, where I'm at, to finish her high school in Memphis. Is that where Graceland is?
Yeah. Yep. In Memphis. So she starts living with Vernon, his dad, and his stepmom. But shocker, soon she's spending nights and then finally living at Graceland and going to high school. You know, the normal teenage scenario.
Yeah, that's what I love. I mean, in the movie, I think they do a good job of the contrast. Well, one, it emphasizes how lonely she was at Graceland because she's so young. And he has a lot of his male friends, so it's very male-focused. He's not there all the time. Yeah, she's so lonely, and she's not really allowed outside because they don't want people knowing that she's living there. So it's a lonely existence for her, and it is weird because there's the glamour of when she is able to go out with him, with Elvis, and then the very mundane finishing high school, doing the high school thing, you know, working on homework.
Yeah, so I can't imagine just trying to balance those two lives. It's kind of crazy. And as we said, supposedly the relationship remains sexless until they marry. But just to clarify, and Aaron already said, Elvis is having plenty of sex with other women, most famously like movie stars like Anne Margaret and Priscilla. Of course, she finds evidence of these things and gets very angry. Like one should.
Yeah, it's like, I'm supposed to be your girlfriend. You're not sleeping with me, but you're sleeping with all these other women. Again, at least from what I know about him, he designates women. He puts them into categories. Priscilla, she's she's the Madonna. She's the angel. I don't want to corrupt her. You know, at least with sleeping with her, I'm going to give her pills and stuff. So I'm going to corrupt her that way, but not sleeping with her. And then, no, of course, more women who are already sort of in that category, who are already sleeping around. They're not virgins, so I can sleep with them. They're fair game.
I'm not going to get too much more into the relationship except for a few more things. One, she noted his aggressiveness, most likely from all those pills, and I'm going to talk about the pills later. For example, one incident left her with a bruised eye and bruised arm.
Yeah, obviously, all the pills that he was taking don't help, but that's not an excuse. You can't use that as an excuse. You can't treat your significant other or anybody like that.
So they marry when she's a respectable 21, and she ends up actually getting pregnant right away, which scares her because she's fucking 21. And at one point during her third trimester, Elvis essentially like suddenly wants a separation.
Yeah, he tries to send her away. Yeah.
Yeah. But they do reconcile within a few days. But again, I'm not loving that, especially once she gives birth. After the birth of their only child, Lisa Marie, he pulls away sexually from her.
Yeah. Because
got a lot of thoughts about that.
Yeah. He sees her as like damaged goods. And it's like, well, boy, who damaged them?
I know. I hate that.
Do better.
Elvis is cheating, but so is Priscilla. So they're both cheating on each other. Yeah. It's a whole goddamn mess. They eventually divorced in 1972. Although, as I said before, it's amicable. They come out of the courthouse holding hands and they stay close for the rest of his life. So I do want to note that.
Yeah, and you can really tell that even as she speaks about him now, he's been gone for decades and they've been divorced even longer, but she still obviously has a lot of fondness for him as her first love. I know that there's obviously a lot of problematic things about their relationship, but I'm not going to tell her how to feel about Elvis. I do think, considering she was involved in the Sofia Coppola's movie, I do think that one, considering how much she liked it and was involved,
it was based on her memoir.
I think it does. I don't think it's the most flattering portrait of Elvis. So the fact that she endorsed it and was involved, obviously she's in some ways coming to terms with that relationship.
Okay, but I'm going to move away from that problematic aspect and to kind of the second big aspect of Elvis, and that's his music. But that also comes with some contradictory views because, of course, I can't say, as we talk about his music, all Black people feel this way about Elvis, right? Of course, there's not going to be just one narrative from a large community. We really do see two camps. Some see him as essentially stealing Black music at a time when Black artists basically couldn't break through. And then there's others, like famously James Brown, who saw Elvis as, quote, a brother, end quote, not just because of their musical ties, but also growing up poor in the South, essentially representing their identity on stage. So you see these two things kind of run together. And especially, I would say, is when Elvis was alive, it was much more on the second thing. He's actually bringing this identity to and this music to a mainstream audience. And later, there's more grappling with that.
Yeah, it's a subject that's come into more attention over the last couple decades.
Yeah. I do want to note he did live right down the road from the so-called birthplace of the blues. This is where B.B. King, Muddy Waters, Bessie Smith all kind of rose up in their careers. And we know he found solace in music. He didn't have a lot of money growing up. Music was his thing, right? This was the music that surrounded him, right? He grew up in a poor, mostly Black neighborhood, and he attended mostly Black churches. So this is what he heard growing up. And I'm going to come back to that here in a little bit, but I just want to make that known. Now, I know Vanity Fair did Carolyn dirty, so I hate quoting them, but I really like this part of an article about the making of the film, not the film Priscilla, but the film Elvis. So Nelson George, he worked as a consultant on Elvis. And as part of that process, obviously, he's going to try to interview people who knew Elvis when he was young, including Black people, right? Who were part of this community who knew Elvis when he was young. They all pretty much had the same answer about him, quote, that he was this weird little white kid, unquote. George told Mojo Media with a laugh, quote, Elvis was an outlier, end quote. So this is where we have those questions, right? He's not a manufactured singer who has no connections to the music he's singing, right? And this is not about Mick Jagger. And you know how much I love Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. So it even harms me to say that. So Mick, if you're listening out there,
if he's not,
I'm not calling you out.
I'm gonna tweet him or something. Beep, boop,
no,
boop, boop. Mick, Jamie's got some things to say about you.
There's singers like Mick Jagger. I'm going to call out Mick. It hurts my heart. You know, who is at the London School of Economics and then also sings rock and roll with that influence. But he has a bigger disconnect, right? Growing up in the UK. And then I'm not saying that Mick Jagger didn't have any connection to the blues. Like, obviously, that's what he loved growing up. But that, like, realness of it is just further away. Basically, this idea of who's allowed to sing the blues in a way and make money off of that.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, neither of us is equipped to necessarily answer that.
Right. We're white women, so.
Yeah. Who cares what we say? But it is a legitimate point to talk about.
It is. I'm not going to give an answer for that. I'm just going to throw out these questions. It's like, can we fault him for that?
Maybe.
I do want to talk more about, as I said, at the time Elvis was rising in the ranks, there definitely was more of a positive relationship with him and the Black press, Black community. Of course, this was a time of desegregation, but this was a really hard time of desegregation in the South. And it was also a time when a lot of television and radio refused to play, quote, Black music, as it was seen as lesser, barbaric, basically not for the mainstream.
Yeah.
But Elvis was seeing
It does give more attention on it, which is not a bad thing.
This is a quote from the now defunct Tan magazine. Quote, Presley makes no secret of his respect for the Negroes, nor of their influence on his singing. Furthermore, he does not shun them, either in public and private. And in another article I read from The Conversation, we continue to see the same pattern. They note that, quote, Presley himself was humble about his relationship with Black music and musicians. He said, a lot of people seem to think I started this business, but rock and roll was here a long time before I came along. Nobody can sing that kind of music like colored people. Let's face it, I can't sing like Fats Domino's can. I know that, end quote.
So he recognizes. That's good that he has that self-awareness.
Right, during that time period. Obviously, he's long dead by now, but in that time period, he's not trying to make it all about
he's
him.
Not saying, this is my sound. This is my sound. I invented it.
But at the same time, the magazine Tan also noted the comparison in which each of them were being paid at that time. Elvis, $2 million, and Fats Domino's less than half of that, $700,000. Yeah. I mean, I would take $700,000, but obviously that's a big disparity.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily Elvis's fault, but we need to call that out.
Exactly. That's the complexity piece. It's like, well, Elvis is not paying Elvis for that. He's not in charge of the money, and actually he's really disconnected from the money, which I'm going to talk about here shortly. The economics piece, it's hard to place that on Elvis's shoulders. Another quote to show at this time the appreciation from Black artists who thought that Elvis helped open the door for them. So Little Richard in 1970 said, quote, I thank God for Elvis Presley. I thank the Lord for sending Elvis to open that door so I could walk down the road. You understand? Clearly, there's a lot of appreciation for Elvis in the Black community at that time for helping that gospel, R&B, all of that now becoming in the mainstream, not seen as vulgar or lesser, suddenly becoming part of rock and roll.
Sort of opened that door to make it more respectable for middle class white people.
It's not the only conversation that people are having, of course. It's a difficult conversation. He, I feel like, really toes this line between cultural appreciation and cultural appropriation, because we know R&B and gospel music has its roots in slavery, and obviously that's not his ancestry. But we also know he did break down that wall and allow Black artists to thrive in an environment that was now open to music like his. So was he pushing the boundary of what was possible at that time? Like, are we asking too much of Elvis during this time period, or putting too much on his shoulders? Or is he really essentially stealing the music, repackaging, and making way more money than Black artists, right? Those are all those questions.
Yeah, it's a lot to untangle and a lot to think through. And those are questions worth asking.
Yes. And the last few things about that, I think this is where we start to get more into the complexity, because so far it's been pretty much positive. This is a telling quote from Inlander, which is an online resource I looked about the people who first discovered Elvis. So they're quoting that first guy, Sam Phillips, from The Sun, before, quote unquote, discovering Elvis. He supposedly said, quote, if I could find a white man who had the Negro sound, I could make $1 million. Eek. No. Yeah. Now, as part of that same article, they say, quote, instead, Elvis's P.T. Barnum, Colonel Tom Parker, would make millions from his exploitation of Presley, end quote. So it really was a calculated move, yes, by these people behind the scenes, even if it wasn't Elvis technically the one with the plan. Like some white dude would have filled that role if it wasn't Elvis.
Yeah, they would have found somebody.
On that note, many of Elvis's big hits that we think of when we hear his name, Hound Dog, All Shook Up, Don't Be Cruel, those are all covers from Black artists. So, for example, Big Mama Thornton, the actual person behind Hound Dog, so who originated it, she was only paid $500 for it.
Yeah.
And Otis Blackwell, he's the Black songwriter behind All Shook Up, Don't Be Cruel, and Return to Sender. All huge hits for Elvis. He notes that Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, which, by the way, he's played by Tom Hanks in the Elvis movie, which I haven't seen, but I'm like, Hanks, why are you doing this to me?
Yeah,
Like,
he's not a typical Tom Hanks.
Stop playing complex.
No.
Yeah, play the nice role. Don't be complex about this. And now his life story is bonkers, but I'm not going to go into that. But basically, his manager forced Otis Blackwell, the songwriter, to give Elvis a co-writing credit on that, even though obviously he did not co-write those songs. Mm-hmm. But do we fault Elvis for turning a blind eye while his manager knowingly did this? Because, to be fair, his manager was a dick to everyone, in particular Elvis, his only client. So do we fault Elvis for turning a blind eye while his manager knowingly, so Colonel Tom Parker, again, Tom Hanks from the movie, even though he forced Otis Blackwell to give Elvis a co-writing credit, apparently Elvis never negotiated any deals he had, and he didn't ever look at the contracts, which Elvis, look at your contracts, because that's why you're going to be living the life you are in the 70s. But
you're like, oh, baby, look at the contracts. Do it. Just a little peruse. Just maybe get a little lawyer. Take a look.
Right. So his managers, yes, obviously exploiting these Black artists, but he's probably most exploiting Elvis. He eventually has this deal where he's taking 50% of what Elvis made. So by the time of his death, Elvis was worth close to $100 million, and yet he had less than $1 million in savings.
I would take $1 million in savings, but I understand your point.
And this was not just from Colonel Tom Parker, but also from his kindness. He gave a lot to strangers and friends. So does race matter here when Parker is exploiting everybody? And that's up to you. As we get to the more present time, this is when conversations, I think, about cultural appropriation really come about. Because, of course, they weren't happening in the 1950s.
I know we'll talk about later when we get to the judgment phase, but how do you weigh that? I know that, as you said, he's not the one necessarily making the deals, and he's also not the one who is putting him front and center as the guy who's bringing this music to mainstream America. So you can't necessarily blame him for that, but does that mean you give him a pass?
Right.
I don't.
Well, I'll tell you later. Does ignorance mean, that you're not culpable?
Yeah.
Probably, I would say in recent times, the most damning has come from Ray Charles from an interview in 1994, but it actually went viral in 2020, this video. So he was interviewed in 1994 about Elvis, and he said, quote, "To say that Elvis was so great and so outstanding, like he's the king. The king of what? I know too many artists that are far greater. He was doing our kind of music," Charles said. "So what the hell am I supposed to get so excited about?"
He's like any famous person. There's this weird balance. People don't want to go to a movie about Elvis and see those complexities on film. They want the straight biopic. They want the hits. They want that. They don't want to wrestle with these conversations.
The legacy.
The people who are buying those tickets, they're Elvis fans, and it's a hard thing to wrestle with when you're a fan of somebody.
Yes. So let's talk about that as a fan of somebody. The accomplishments. let's talk more about Elvis's accomplishments and his effect on American culture. According to the Medium article I read, it noted that Elvis has been the center of American life since he first came onto the scene in the 1950s until really recently, whether it was his songs on soundtracks or the many, many depictions of him on big and small screen or those dressed as him for Halloween. There's even 50 plus years after his death, he's still so recognizable.
Yeah,
right?
you can easily spot. He's everywhere.
Yeah, you see somebody in a bejeweled jumpsuit with the black hair, and you're like,
Elvis. Yeah.
Elvis, right? And there's very few people who can have that much of an impact, especially, as we said, like 70 plus years later. The Beatles, yes, but even they were huge fans of Elvis.
Yeah, it's only, probably, you could probably count those individuals on your hand that have that kind of far-reaching impact on both popular culture, music, etc.
In the accomplishments section, I do want to highlight, as I said earlier, his military service, as it is easy to overlook. So from Graceland's website, I think this quote really puts it all together. It says, quote, "Without any of the special privileges his celebrity status might have afforded him, Elvis honorably served his country in the U.S. Army," end quote. And I think that's really an incredible thing that I have to give him a lot of credit for. I can't see many huge music superstars today, if there was a draft, going and joining the Army. I mean, even former, like, huge music superstars, so those who are, like, totally forgotten, like Joey Fatone from NSYNC is not going if he's drafted.
We should ask Joey. Maybe he would. That's a lot to put on Joey's shoulders.
I'm sorry. Just telling you, Joey, I don't think you would do it. And you also have to remember this was during his prime years, and there's no guarantee that after a few years of service, he had 2 years of active service, that he could go right back to that superstardom. There's never that guarantee, ever. And actually, more than not, that doesn't happen. The world moves on.
It's pretty rare. I mean, and it's rare and surprising that he was able to pick up where he left off when he got back.
And I think we can't also discount his musical and acting accomplishments. I know they may seem minor, like more commercial success or surface level, but we know the joy music and film bring people, right? Music can do so much for people's lives, and great films can too. And his music is still making huge amounts of money worldwide.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
As I said, like 70 plus years after it's released. And that's not just a coincidence. Hell, I mean, even John Lennon said, without Elvis, there would be no Beatles. That cultural impact is hard to even comprehend.
Yeah. I mean, you could spend your entire life trying to calculate that, and you'd never get to the right answer. It's a huge, far-flung amount of impact that he's given with art,
and still drawing in people, right? The fact that this film Priscilla and Elvis just came out in the last few years is showing that people are still talking about him and wanting to go to movies about him.
Yeah, he's a draw.
And over his career, he had 33 successful films, which I had no clue was that many. He had 18 number one hits. Okay, this is going to make us feel really old, though, too, this next one. So he receives a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award at 36.
Woo!
I know.
It's like lifetime. Your life's over. It's 36. I mean, this is what we did talk about Isabella France becoming a grandma at 34 or something in the last episode.
I know. All these episodes are just making us cringe with feeling old at 35. Like, he's giving a lifetime achievement.
My husband, Matt, who's been on the show before as our listener, he's a big baseball fan. And whenever they talk about, baseball's a game for young people, like, he's the oldest man you've ever seen. He's the oldest man in the league, and he's like 40.
It does make you, though, feel even older when you're watching 21-year-old Elvis. And personality-wise, Graceland's website noted that Elvis was known for his humility, kindness, and humor. We saw it in that first clip, him being very light and not taking himself seriously. Another example on the kindness front, Elvis was notoriously a huge Cadillac fan, And he was known every time when he bought a Cadillac, he would buy a Cadillac for somebody else on the lot. Elvis was definitely known for giving a lot to his fans, which I'm going to talk about here in his later years. I'm not going to go into great detail about his later years, besides a few key things, including his demanding touring schedule. Like, it wasn't uncommon for him to arrive and leave in a city in the same 24 hours, 3 weeks at a time. And
I could never.
And he played 2 shows a night on Saturday, and just crazy. And of course, his Vegas shows. One thing I wanted to mention that I think encapsulates some of his later years and, I don't want to say irrational fears, but just things weighing on him. For example, he was diagnosed with glaucoma, which, if you don't know, it is a serious eye disease that you can eventually become blind, but it can be treated. I don't want to minimize this, but I think it shows the toll all the touring and his crazy schedule did to him. So in the From How Stuff Works article, it said, quote, Elvis had become consumed with an irrational fear that he would be blind by the end of the year. He grew morose, irritable, and reclusive. It took 6 months for his doctor, his family, and his friends to convince him that his case was treatable, end quote.
Oh,
yeah. This is when you get the bejeweled jumpsuits with his shows in Vegas. But he still maintains, as we said before, that self-deprecating attitude, like mocking of his 1950s sex symbol. He would talk about the, quote, old days. Why his shows were so successful is he really treated the audience like they were his friends or close family. Like, he would throw things into the crowd, even it became like well known, like he'd brush his brow with sweat and we'd throw it like into the crowd like multiple times. But and then of course I know.
But I know other people wouldn't feel that way. But
know.
For me, I'm like, who knows?
And they threw things back at him. Like, it just became this big thing, that relationship. And for those fawning women, again, at this time, they're older, growing older, right? Not that he's really old. We're talking like 40.
Over the hill. Done. Washed
Right.
up at 40.
But compared to the 21-year-old, right? So for the
yeah.
fawning women, he gave them hugs, he gave them kisses, he held their hands. He really knew what the fans wanted. He pretty much gave them everything he had. I really think, and it's noted, but he had a very unique rapport with his audiences. So I have a clip here if you want to watch from one of his Vegas shows. I think gives you a little idea of his self-deprecating humor and also his look in the later years. So I'm going to mute. I'll let you watch. Okay. It's not long, so.
All right, I watched it. Yeah, he's very self-deprecating, making fun of him on the Ed Sullivan show.
Yeah, I like that connection. That's why I picked that one specifically.
Yeah.
But even just joking about that, like, he's very
playful. Yeah, very playful. We wouldn't be surprised about somebody chatting like that to the audience now, but I can see how it was unique at that time.
Yeah, especially in Vegas.
Yeah,
Vegas, it was just huge. People were obsessed. His shows were always sold out because it brought something new. I think he really kind of starts that era of big artists coming to Las Vegas, not necessarily on their end, even though this is like the ending years of Elvis. But if anything, this is a resurgence for him when he really becomes the king. Like the jumpsuits, the bejeweled, the rings, like the excess. This, like, when you think of that, that's this time.
There's not a lot of artists. The Beatles have sort of that reinvention, and then obviously nowadays you've got Taylor Swift in her eras. I think that this is unique where you can see he really does change from the 50s through the 60s, and then now as you're in the early 70s, and he's got the look that we all think of when somebody mentions. Yeah, when you think of Elvis, you think the jumpsuit, you think Vegas, You think of that hair with the giant sideburn.
Yeah. And which is crazy because, right, it's really his last few years, but music had changed so much. This kind of connection with his fans came at a price. Although this wasn't anything new, he became more and more isolated. He was always, once he hit superstardom, pretty isolated because he couldn't just go, to dinner or do this and that without being swarmed. But especially post-divorce, and then in this cycle, he just increasingly became more isolated outside of performing, basically staying in Graceland or his home in California. And with that escalated dependence on both diet pills and just all these pills to help him stay awake and to go to sleep and to stay on his schedule because he had such a crazy schedule. It was like you needed uppers to stay awake, now downers to go to sleep. And then he had all these prescription pills for supposedly like digestive issues, glaucoma, back pain, etc. Looking back, obviously, this is really self-destructive, but he's in this little bubble. I do feel for him because he's very isolated, and he's always been a little self-destructive with the pills and things like that, but now he's older and it's to a different degree.
Yeah, is to think that it is as you said, it's a brutal schedule. And
I'll talk about why he did it here in a second. Like, why would you do that to yourself? You're out with Elvis fucking Presley. Like, why?
Well, who does Vegas shows is a grueling schedule. Not everybody can keep up. And if you're already prone to being self-destructive, then it's not surprising that he fell down that route.
Yeah, and I really feel like in a way he did give everything. He gave all of himself to his fans. I feel like you can see that in the performances. Like he wasn't just phoning it in. It was like in every performance he was giving all of himself, which is, if anything, worse when you're performing that much because there's only so much of yourself you can give.
Yeah. No.
And
boy was sweaty. He was sweating.
I know. His doctor, who was known as Dr. Nick, this is crazy. He prescribed him over 12,000 pills in the last 1.5 years of his life.
1.5 years?
Yeah. So he had to carry it along on his tour in 3 suitcases.
I was about to say, that's not like a little pill pack. It's a lot. No.
And Dr. Nick will be later brought up on malpractice charges after Elvis's death.
You don't say.
I
but
know.
This isn't too unusual. At that time, you think of JFK had Dr. Feelgood on so many pills and combos. They were really just passing them out like candy.
Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much what it was with those suitcases. It was up for anybody in his close group of friends and kind of hanger-ons. Were called the Memphis Mafia. It was like opened up and like, yep, take what you want.
That's not going to lead to anything bad.
No. But why keep touring, or why not take more breaks? Because obviously he's burning himself out at a pace he can't keep up with.
I'm assuming a lot of that comes down to the money that you said.
So as I noted earlier, his manager, not Tom Hanks, but Colonel Tom Parker.
Tom Hanks is a national treasure. We will not talk ill of him.
I know. Just only make him in feel-good roles and don't like seeing him evil. So his being Elvis, his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, as I said, only client is Elvis. He ran up huge debts from gambling and other shady things. So essentially, Elvis had to keep working insane hours to help Parker pay back these debts. So just to give you an idea of what I'm talking about when I'm talking about debts, one of Elvis's Memphis Mafia group of friends, as I said, those are like his closest knit friends who toured with him. They noted that, quote, in a period of an hour and a half, I saw him lose over $1.25 million. What?
Quote. Dude.
Yeah. His manager's losing over $1.25 million in an hour and a half. That just gives you a little glimpse. He's just piling up debts. Yeah. So Elvis was growing tired of the mundaneness of the Vegas sets and he wanted to do something new, but he really had to keep going because of the money.
Yeah, I always think in terms of artists, when they get to a point where they don't love it anymore to an extent, whether it's the fan relationship, there are things that they love, but to get to that point where you've worn yourself thin and it becomes less like art and more like a job.
Yeah, and supposedly he was self-conscious about that his voice was changing. He grew older and like he wasn't able to hit certain notes and things like that. But any case, either way, the schedule that he was able to do as a 21, 22-year-old with all those uppers and downers, when you add in all these other things, as a 40, 41-year-old, 42-year-old, you're not able to keep up that same pace.
Hey,
so
as a 35-year-old, I can relate.
You can do it now, but when you get to 42, nope. So in 1977, he died at only 42 years old, which I knew he died young, but I think especially recording this now and thinking about it now as like a 35-year-old and thinking about my boyfriend, and I know your husband's older than that, but my boyfriend being 39, about to be 40, like,
yeah, it puts things in perspective.
He looks older, and I know it's just the time period of the bloatedness and all that, but 42, like,
yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't even get their first break until their 30s or sometimes in their 40s. So the fact that he had lived, a couple lifetimes in terms of his art by then.
Right. Reinvention, all the stuff by 42. Like, when we think in a way of Elvis in his Vegas days, we think like he's in his late 40s, 50s.
Yeah, a much older, mature man.
Right.
As you get older, once you reach your 30s, like we do, yeah, it really does put things in perspective when you hear that. It becomes not that you can't appreciate the tragedy of him dying so young when you're younger, but it really does hit home as you get closer to that age.
For sure.
So I'm like, I don't have a single.
I don't have a Grammy Lifetime Award.
No, I don't have. I haven't been on a Billboard chart. I never. And if you guys have heard me on this, never will. You've heard me sing on here.
I know we haven't sung yet, but I'm gonna quote. I'm gonna take a title of one of Elvis' songs as we move into the judgment portion. So, is he the devil in disguise? Which I've been like grooving on to so much the last few days. So good. I've listened to Elvis on and off, and I always remember our dad saying that his mom loved.
Yeah, that's what I thought about.
Yeah. Was it Blue Christmas?
Was it Blue Christmas? I just know that she loved Elvis.
Yes, Blue. Yeah, she did. And like, I remember Blue Christmas, but, blue. Oh, there, no, going.
No.
Nope, not gonna do. No, I'm pulling back.
That'll be our Christmas episode.
As I was doing research and listening to his music, I was like, oh, damn.
Yeah.
It
holds up.
Good.
It holds up. Yeah. There's a reason that it's not just the people who discovered his music at that time that are still into him. It's younger people who are discovering it for the first time. The person who presents always goes first. Where are you, besides the fact that you're back into his music, where do you go in terms of his legacy and final judgment? Not the final judgment. Our final judgment.
Our final judgment.
Just to clarify.
Yeah. We don't have that kind of power.
Yeah.
I'm starting to think about that this morning. And I think I really lean 70% good, 30%. I don't want to say evil, but more negative, villainous piece. I think at his heart, like his early years, his biography, that affected so much of what was to come.
Mm-hmm.
The music he was surrounded by and loved. I don't think he was trying to take quote unquote black music and steal it for his own.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it doesn't matter whether he
the intention or not.
intention, but I do think because he grew up in those neighborhoods and hearing that music and going to those churches, like while it's not his story, like the roots of that type of music, it is his experience as a child and that music really standing out to him and really providing comfort.
I think nobody could say that he didn't genuinely love that music, and that's why he was singing it, was because he loved it. And whether it was because he grew up with it or felt an affinity for it.
Yeah, and I think the fact that he did at the time, he didn't have to, and I think most artists won't keep coming back to the fact that, like, I didn't invent this. Like, this is not me starting this. And so the fact that he did that, I think, for the time period is something to note as a positive, because he doesn't have to say that. He's Elvis Presley at that time.
Yeah, we already talked about it being at least having some self-awareness, which
Yeah.
It's hard to have that for anybody, let alone Elvis.
Especially at the time. Like, we're not talking about reflecting in his later years and being like, oh, now I recognize that. But like at the time, being so appreciative and naming Black artists that he admired, he felt like revolutionized things. Now, of course, having the manager that he did, that was a choice that he made. And that manager did, I think, totally, obviously, I don't want to say screw, I guess, but take advantage of Black artists 100%. But he also took advantage of Elvis, as we saw. I think, obviously, Elvis was naive, but I think as a kid, especially being like 21, you're like,
yeah, no, I understand when he's younger. That's why I was just wondering why. I know that he kind of chafed under Colonel Parker's, under the weight of all that. So I was just curious why he didn't. I mean, there's usually, in terms of, like, you think of most musical artists, they start with somebody and then as they get bigger, they move on.
Yeah, I feel like if maybe he had lived a few more years, Elvis would have been like, that's it, because they already were drifting apart by the end.
Okay.
I don't think he always recognized when people were exploiting him.
Yeah.
Like in that case.
Yeah, I do think that's a good point.
And the positive piece is also the cultural effect he had, because I really don't think, again, musicians like the Beatles or Rolling Stones could have broke through the same way they did without Elvis. And so while music seems trivial, it plays a huge part in people's lives, and it's played a huge part in my life. So I can't discount that. And he gave up a lot to be fucking Elvis. Like, he did. He couldn't go to the grocery store. He couldn't go out to dinner. Like, he just had to be isolated. And so it's really kind of sad.
Yeah, even though you get the adulation on stage, that's still... And you go... Yeah, you don't have anybody. I know he had Priscilla and then girlfriends and such afterwards, but it's still such a lonely existence to feel like you're set apart from everybody. You're on that stage and everybody else is away from you. You're all alone.
Yeah, I mean, literally, in his Vegas shows, people would clap for the encore, and they'd say, like, the king has left the house, because he would literally booked it out and right into a car and out of there, because of the, like, security concerns and all of that people were so crazy about him. Okay, I finished my song. Now I'm running to the car and getting out of here. So that I feel sympathetic towards. Now, the 30% where I get, obviously,
how do you square? Yeah, it's sort of his views on women, his relationship with Priscilla, and some of the more unsavory elements.
Yeah, that gets me. I don't want to say at all that I'm more understanding, but I think the fact that Priscilla does still hold him as somebody very special does mean something, and I don't want to discount her experience.
Yeah. I mean, I think these are the conversations that we should be having, and these come up every time a new Elvis film or whatever is released. So I think that it's worth having. Where I get a little bit frustrated is people trying to tell Priscilla what she should believe of her experience. I mean, I think we all know that a 14 and a 24-year-old should not be dating, but that doesn't mean that we weren't there. I'm sure she has very fond memories, and
right. We can't discount their life together.
Yeah, and he died so young, and I'm sure there's a lot of grief and memories they go so strongly together. So I'm sure that has something to do with it. Yeah, we should be having these conversations, but to tell somebody, no, your relationship was like invalid, that's where I think we should draw the line.
100%. With his music, I give him a little more. I think it'd be more 60-40 if he hadn't had some of that lived experience of he grew up poor in Memphis. This was the type of music he was surrounded by. He didn't just stumble upon it as some rich kid and like, oh, I like the sound of this.
Yeah, this is going to make me money. That wasn't
Right.
It wasn't because he thought that it was lucrative. It was because he had a real affinity for the music and the sound.
Yeah. I mean, I'd already talked about what James Brown had said, but James Brown was a very close friend of his, and he was actually one of the only people who was able to see Elvis's body after he passed. And so there obviously was a closeness between some of these big Black artists and Elvis that same thing. I can't invalidate and be like, no, Little Richard or James Brown, you can't feel that way about Elvis.
I think everybody's allowed to have their own opinions on him. I'm not going to tell somebody on either side that that's not a valid opinion. I think I could see how somebody gets to both ends of the spectrum.
So that's where I come up, and then I find sympathy in the fact that he's, I think, a kind person at heart. I think trying to connect with people in the only ways he can in his later years. The fact that he did become like this Vegas phenomenon, and he wasn't just going through the motions, he was doing it, and like they said, the people were crazy about him. He pretty much gave everything he had to his fans.
Yeah, he got a lot out of it as well.
Yeah, that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, I think I would be about 70-30 as well. I always find it hard to evaluate these ones like an artist because, that output that they give to us is so important, whether it's music, books. So many of my favorite writers are problematic. F. Scott Fitzgerald. I think that's the ultimate question as people have is how do you approach an artist, their work, and their lives? And can you disentangle that? I don't want to reiterate the same points about the cultural appreciation part and all that. And I agree with you in terms of the Priscilla aspect. I mean, it's certainly an unsavory part of his history. And I think it's fair that we should rightfully bring it up every time he's mentioned. I don't think he should get a pass just because he's Elvis. But do I think that he is a malicious and a bad person at heart? No. I think he has problematic views about women and sexuality, but he would hardly be the first one, and certainly not the last one to hold those views. I think the best that you can do in terms of artists, and when an artist like him has those unsavory elements, is to bring him up, hold that up. Don't discard it. These aren't saints. We're not writing hagiography, I think is what it's called.
I don't know
Hagiography.
what that is.
That's like the lives of saints. We're not writing that. We're allowed to approach our artists, even people who we love. You can love the art, but not love everything about the artist is sort of where I land. And I have to land because a lot of my favorite artists are inherently problematic. I think that's sort of where I'm at in terms of Elvis and his legacy. I think there's certainly a reason why I don't think his music and stuff will ever die. It hasn't yet. Each new generation gets introduced to it, and I can't foresee a future without Elvis and Elvis music. So I think that you can't discount that either, that he's not only a cultural icon, but somebody whose music is also influencing new artists and people who take his music and sort of reinvent it.
Yeah. The longevity of it is pretty remarkable.
I think he's a uniquely interesting figure. He's very, very much a tragic hero. He's like a Byronic hero in terms of like very romantic.
Yes, I'm for sure going to watch Priscilla, but I was also thinking just of watching, when I was watching his performances, like on Ed Sullivan and everything. It reminds me of when we watched Gimme Shelter from the Rolling Stones, and when they're first listening to Wild Horses, that first demo. There's just something that when you capture somebody listening to music or somebody in that moment about to sing, there's a lot of vulnerability, and I think it tells a lot about the person. I really like seeing that.
Yeah, it's the moment before creation.
Yeah, beautiful way to put that.
Occasionally it can be eloquent.
So we'll end it there, I think. I think we both noted our similar views.
Yeah.
Hopefully this was, I don't want to say fun one because there's always the problematic pieces, but I feel like it was a fun one to research, and I'll still be jamming out to Elvis probably this week.
That's fair. I might have to pull up an Elvis playlist and start jamming too. So.
God, Devil in Disguise, it got me good.
Yeah.
So definitely will be listening to more Elvis. So thank you, everybody who stuck with us and hopefully came out with their own judgment of Elvis as we can dove into his career, his life, music, everything. I'll put links for what I had Aaron look at, the photos, the clips, and everything in the show notes, so you can also see that as well as the sources. But it's kind of fun to see what I sent her, what she was getting that raw reaction from. As we said before, we appreciate all our listeners. All I ask, can you do us one favor this week and tell one friend or one family member about our show and where to listen? That'd be an awesome, easy thing to do, and we really appreciate it. Anything you want to say, Erin?
No.
Or any preview or anything about your next person?
No. I'm gonna let them
go with that.
Yeah, you will see. We always do. Again, if you're not following us on social media, please do. Especially on Instagram, we always do a little preview, so you'll know ahead of time who we are doing. So just keep a lookout.
If you're not following us on Instagram, you would have seen yesterday or 2 days ago that we were going to be covering Elvis. And of course, I mentioned it at the end of the last episode.
Yeah, so that's always a good spot. We'll always give you previews on who's coming next on the next episode.
Yeah, and some new information, like your Eleanor Cross's video is super interesting. I'm still waiting for you to post Life in Italy.
Okay, yeah, don't worry, I still will. Yeah,
I love the social media one, though, with Captain Holt from Brooklyn Nine-Nine. It's amazing.
I know. That's,
I'm accepting that for now, but I do want more of the facts so I can make up my mind.
Oh, that's not good enough for you?
I mean, a little more.
That was photographic evidence of Edward II.
That's your source. That's your sources. Yep. I mean, I almost bought it, but just a little more.
Okay.
A little more.
I will. Yeah. Keep a lookout. That is still coming.
Yeah. I don't know what we'll do midweek because this is a one-parter, so
I don't know. We'll just have to figure something out.
Maybe, yeah, follow us on Instagram. It's your best place to see. Maybe we'll post something a little bit special midweek.
Yeah.
But thank you again. We appreciate you. And I'm not going to do an Elvis voice. Good night.
Bye.